All right, welcome to the Golden Belt Buckle Podcast. Thank you for clicking on my video. We're going to get right into it, but before we do, if you could like and subscribe, just let you know I really appreciate your subscription. I am 100% aware that I'm not entitled to it and that every video I am making a first impression on somebody. So last night I dropped a video. If you've been watching my videos, then you know I like to get the context. I like timelines. I like to go a little bit deeper into the story. I don't like just reporting things, right? You know, this happened and then this happened. No, I like tying things together to see what it all means, or just, I got to get a picture in my head. And if you're subscribed to this, then maybe you think like I do, right? So last night I dropped a video where I was looking at the context of India, right? If you haven't watched it, go check it out. You know, just the context that Harjinder Singh came from, right? So we could maybe understand his mindset a little bit more. And he would be representative of pretty much anybody who comes over, right? Probably a lot of people who come over. So we figured out, you know, he came from a culture that glorifies and North America, like it's almost like it's the promised land here, right? And so we looked into that. We took a deep look into that. Then we looked into the culture of corruption that was surrounding driver's licenses and all that sort of stuff. And we're not going to rehash all that. Just if you want to go back to the video and watch it, that would be cool. You don't need to watch it to understand this one. But then right after I dropped that video, a little bit later, another article came out which shed some more light on his context, which would have been nice to have about 5 hours earlier, but you know, maybe the information was already out there and I didn't know. So his home village, I can't pronounce this right, Rataul in India, they are now coming out to defend him. So if you picture this, you've got a battle brewing between the states and the Fed, right? And now you've also online petitions trying to, you know, support for Harjinder Singh, and then you've got his home village is getting involved in this, right? And they're encouraging it's the Punjabi Congress, I think it's called Punjabi Assembly in Punjab, is encouraging every Punjabi in the United States who's a member of their party to also get in and show their support for Harjinder Singh. And what they're arguing is that the penalty is too harsh. They're saying, look, this is what they're saying. He made a mistake. 45 years in prison is way too harsh. You know, one guy said he would rather die, or he would beg for death, because he's got nothing left now. He took a loan out on his parents' property to pay for his illegal trip over to the States, and you know, he followed the process. He didn't do anything wrong. He followed the process. Yep. And if you're going to blame anyone, they say, you need to also blame the DMV for giving him a license. Yep. So that's what they're arguing. So you've got this big fight brewing. But before we get into the arguments they're making, let's just look at this. So he's probably, when he was over in the state, well, he's over in the States now in jail, but during his time driving, he was probably sending remittance payments back to his parents, and you know, paying off that loan and all that. So probably a good part of his money was going back to the homeland. Apparently, remittance payments are massive to India's economy. So they call it the Punjab diaspora. Well, it's not just them; it's anyone, right? Any Indian, Hindu or Christian or Muslim, they send a lot of money back to India, and it really helps out the Indian economy. So yeah, you have this guy. He came from what looked to be a fairly rough background, impoverished. I would say, lack of opportunities. So like others, Harjinder Singh sought to immigrate to the States. Couldn't do it legally, did it illegally. And one question that fascinates me about him, and we'll get into the arguments here in a minute, but one question that fascinates me is, what stories are people hearing around their dinner table, right? We want to get an idea what motivated him, right? Because that's what I like doing. And, I think culture matters. What you've been taught as a kid matters. And what you saw as a kid matters, right? And so back in 1991, his village was the scene of an armed conflict with the government. The Punjabis wanted to separate, and I think it was back in the 80s, my facts are right, they wanted to separate, it didn't happen, it came to armed conflict, and then just the most awful things happened, and his village ended up having a firefight with government authorities back in 91. And there's complaints that, women were savagely raped by the police that came in. Innocent teenage Punjabi boys were murdered, helpless, defenseless. They were murdered, and there was one story about a 3-year-old being tossed into the mud while his mother was getting raped, and his it was a disabled child or something. I don't know, they beating him up too. Like just abusing people, right? And so like you read these stories about what was going on there back in the 80s, and then this story from the early 90s, and you start to get a picture, right, of this guy. And this would have affected how he was raised. I'm sure this would have affected, like I've lived long enough, I've suffered traumas in life, and it does something involuntary to your brain. It just changes you, right? So that combined with his Sikh cultural background kind of makes sense to me why he was looking so stoic after that accident. Why it looked like he just didn't care. Was he a psychopath, or did the trauma that he maybe suffered, the hardships, all that stuff growing up, would that have affected his empathy, right? Like psychopaths have a lack of empathy, so do sociopaths. But I don't know what this guy is, but my point is he had no emotion when he did that wreck. Like it was like he didn't even care. And so when you get looking at their culture, his background and then their culture, you realize there could be trauma involved, because the stories he was hearing around his dinner table as a kid probably involved a lot of war stories, a lot of violence. His parents, that this would have affected them. But then also culturally, and I guess I didn't know this and I should have, but Sikhs, they're not into showing their emotions very much. They're raised to believe that masculinity is shown by being stoic. And there's actually studies and a lot of discussion now amongst these communities, from what I'm reading, that saying, look, being stoic isn't always the best way to deal with things. And the one that I think is really interesting for us, especially if you're a white North American, they view mental health issues and weakness, all that stuff, that they call it a white man's problem. Mental illness is effeminate, and they call it a white man's problem. That kind of gives you an idea how they see you, how a lot of them see you over here. But anyway, but with this background, he wouldn't have felt like he could show any emotion anyways, right? So let's get into this a little bit further, okay? So that's his background a little bit more, right? He comes from that background. He sees all the glorification and all that we talked about going to North America. And now after this accident, they're arguing that the penalty is too serious to fit the crime. Well, I live in Canada. I come from a context where the penalty never suits the crime. It's the opposite extreme. But it's kind of the point. If right now he has been warned, everybody's been warned, Mr. Trump is cleaning house. I don't know how much clearer that needs to be made to people. Okay? He was warned. There was another guy, I read an article just today. He spent his life savings trying to immigrate to the States illegally. He got arrested, detained by ICE, and sent over within 3 months, sent back home. Right? So, like, you've been warned. The government's after you. And now, even now, since this happened, they're going to be using ICE agents at way stations. So, you got to realize, people need to start realizing how serious this is. He was driving out of service, despite the fact there's been laws on the books since 1936 that state federally you must be able to read and speak English to operate a commercial motor vehicle. Different governments may have chosen to enforce it or not enforce it, but that's the law. Mr. Trump is now enforcing it, right? So he's been driving out of service with an out of service offense even after Mr. Trump was elected and told everybody what he was going to do. So, yeah, the penalty is harsh because he collided with 3 people, right? He brought stereotypically Punjabi driving habits from India over to the United States and became a poster child for Donald Trump's immigration policies or enforcement policies, right? You can't argue that, right? So, yeah, that's the whole point, is to make an example. And, the one fella arguing that the DMV, well, they should be blamed too. Yeah. And they are, right? That's the whole point of this fighting between Donald Trump and the states. They're fighting with each other now to figure out who's at fault. Personally, I kind of poo-pooed it a few podcasts ago because I wasn't sure if I wanted to put the statement in, but I'm not sure if, like, you talk about California gave him a license. At this point, if I was going to say California did anything wrong, and I'm not a lawyer, this is just my 2 cents, they gave him they gave him a driver's license, a limited driver's license, a limited term CDL, when he didn't qualify for one. He didn't qualify for it because he can't speak English. So he must have went into the DMV with his Washington State license and said, I want to switch this over. Isn't that how that works? I mean, I don't know for sure how it works over there, okay? But he must have gone in there unable to speak English. Even now in court, he's got interpreters. So did they not recognize that this guy can't speak English? So yeah, that right now, Mr. Trump's administration is fighting with the states to figure out who's at fault, because heads are going to roll and people are going to get sued. It's just a matter of who and how many. So there's that. And then, the argument that he followed the law. Now, if by following the procedure you mean, yeah, he followed the correct procedure. He immigrated to the States illegally, got picked up, said he was afraid for his life, and then he paid his bond, and then claimed asylum status, got his CDL, got his work visa, and then got his limited or his CDL. Yeah, he followed the process, and voila, he's not undocumented anymore, right? He's an illegal alien with asylum status, driving a semi-truck legally. But there's 2 things that come to my mind. There's the letter of the law, there's the spirit of the law. The letter of the law, which is what I think this guy is looking at, he's saying, this is the process. Illegal immigration, claim asylum, get your work permit, get your CDL. That's the process. What's wrong with it? Well, I'm pretty sure if you talk to a lawyer about the spirit of the law, and I could be wrong. I'm just giving you my commentary, my thoughts when I read this. The spirit of the law is not to go that route, right? That would be called abusing the privilege. right? You're abusing the goodwill of the government, of the host government, by coming in and claiming that you're afraid for your life when it's a bogus claim. Now, whether it's a bogus claim, that's going to be determined. Like, they're going to have to probably going to talk about this stuff in court. I can't make that determination. I'm just giving you my thoughts about this. So, yeah, he followed the process to the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law, he's abusing it, just like millions of others have abused it. And now you get, because they've abused it, you get someone like Mr. Trump, who's been elected, who's like, no, we're going to clean the house, right? And we're going to make an example out of people. You know, he doesn't have to have the power to get rid of every single illegal immigrant, right? We talked about a few podcasts ago that, you know, the reason why they just automatically renew work visas a lot of times, and probably the fast cards too, is because there's just too many people to process, right? They can't interview everybody, so they just automatically renew it. Well, that's fine, but he doesn't need to be able to get every individual. He just needs to make you think you can, or think he can. He just needs to make you feel uncomfortable. He just needs you to know it's a possibility. And, you know, you can see it right now. The immigration numbers through the Mexican border are down. You know, just to add on that, I just found this out today. I didn't realize that 2024 there were 40,000 Punjabis who entered the United States after coming to Canada illegally. Let that sink in, right? If you're, you know, I get talking about Canadian issues regarding this immigration issue and truck driving and all that. And if you're American, you're like, I'm going to tune out. It doesn't matter. That's Canada. I'm American. No, it affects you. Like I said, look at the broader picture. You've got a feeder country. You got North America and you got a feeder country, right? People are coming over here. They're crisscrossing. They're going wherever they want to go. And look, I'm not trying to beat up. This is not a message to anybody who's here legally, right? You've watched my other videos. You know what I think about that. I don't care what your background is. This is Canada, the United States. These are the lands of opportunity. Okay, so yeah, like that's the thinking about that. The letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. Now, who do I have empathy for in all this? First and foremost, I have empathy for the people that got killed on the freeway, right? I have empathy for them and their families. They were going about their business, and someone who shouldn't have been there in the first place made an illegal U-turn, and killed them. That's not an accident. That's a collision. That is a preventable collision, right? So I've got empathy for them. I've got empathy. I even have empathy as a father. I have empathy for Harjinder's family, because according to the article I was reading, they're terrified. They're heartbroken. You know, their son made a horrible mistake. He made a lot of horrible mistakes, and now he's probably going to prison for the rest of his life, right? And he was probably sending them money back. So I've got from one parent to another. If my kids did something like that, or the equivalent to it, look, they're your kids. You're gonna feel for them no matter what they do, right? I mean, so I feel for them. I also have empathy for their situation, right? Look, I'm a Canadian. Just go with me here for a minute. I have empathy for their situation of squalor because, you know, look, when you get yourself in a situation where the system isn't working for you anymore, you don't feel like you have any stake in the system, you're not just going to let yourself die, okay? No one needs to tell me that I can live, okay? I'm going to do what I got to do to live. And if that means, if I'm that down and out, the system has disenfranchised me that bad, or I feel like that, I might resort to lying and cheating and stealing, right? But I also know that's going to create a tension, right? Those whom the system is working for, who want to keep it that way, who have houses and families, you're going to end up fighting with them. And that's what's happened here with Mr. Harjinder Singh, right? He didn't win the genetic lottery, okay? He was born in an area that has had a lot of problems, a lot of turmoil, and you don't need to tell someone they have the right to life, okay? It's just something that you're going to fight for it, right? So I have empathy for that. Now, why? Because I'm a Canadian, as I said. A few years back, we had the COVID lockdowns. My government, at that moment, created two distinctly new classes of Canadians. Those who were essential and those who were non-essential. Those who were non-essential, you could say, well, they weren't disenfranchised from the system. They got their CERB payments that we had to pay back. I went to the protests. Okay, I talked to a lot of the non-essential people. I wasn't even sure if I was going to be non-essential. I think I was at first. We did auto parts. I was doing auto parts at the time. And so I talked to people at the protests. I saw grown men crying because they had rent payments on their business, that they were renting space for their business, and they were told, no, you can't open your business. You're non-essential. Right? Screw you. You and your family, your kids are non-essential. Normal people, right? Who followed the rules, played in the system, were told you're not essential. While those who were essential, they would sit there in their ivory towers, still making moves, still able to work their jobs, still able to buy up properties and invest, take advantage of our system. And they had no mercy on those who were not part of the system anymore. Those who were disenfranchised. They didn't care. I remember going to a protest once. There was a girl in my riding. She ended up being the PPC candidate. What's her name? She's on my Facebook. I can't remember. But anyways, she went out there. She's standing out there by herself looking stupid with a protest sign. And then next thing you know, she's got 200 people behind her, right? And next thing you know, the PPC is recruiting her to run as a candidate. But I remember going to one of those protests. I'm talking to these protesters, right? In fact, I'm taking part in the protest. I'm not even going to lie to you. I had enough. I didn't like people being told they were non-essential, normal people. I couldn't deal with it. Yeah. A jeweler not allowed to open his store because he's non-essential, right? Just the stupidity of the whole thing. I'm sorry. Maybe I've lost a few of you now. But I see this guy drive by in his car, he yells at everybody, "You effing idiots," and drives off, just keeps on driving. And I thought, man, you're the most ignorant bastard. Number one, you have no idea what these people are going through or why you think they just wanted to stand up. Normal, everyday Canadians standing out there protesting. You think they wanted to do that, right? And number two, he didn't understand the rage. What that can do to somebody. The rage. I knew people, I'm not going to say I was one of them, but I knew a lot of people. It brought out something inside of them that they didn't know was there. It brought out a side of them. The movie 1917, I think it's called, right at the start, the dialogue is amazing. The guy says, inside of every man is another man, a cold, conniving man, right? Now, of course, he ended up murdering his wife, but that's what this did to us. It took normal, hardworking family men, and it transformed them into, it was borderline ready to bring the beast out in a lot of people. So that is much less right there, what we went through, than what someone like Harjinder Singh and his community went through. We didn't have police officers coming and raping our women and our daughters. We don't know what it's like to generally grow up in a society where there's no opportunity. And so that's the struggle. That's the struggle, right? And so he, from his parents' perspective, he's a good son. He did what he had to do. He couldn't get over the legal way, so he went the illegal way. But society has to do what it's got to do to protect itself. This world comes down to, who do you love more, right? You love your kids more. Like, I love my kids more than other people's. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way it is. So, anyway, That's my thoughts on this for today. I've got more I want to say, but I'm going to do it in another video. It deserves its own video. So anyways, like and subscribe. I appreciate your comments, interact with each other, and I'm sorry if I lost a few of you with that rant at the end there. Anyway, take care. Till next time, keep the rubber side down. Cheers.